We're at the site where 4 of the Gilgo victims were found. They were all found, this has all been changed. When they were found, this bike path was not here. This guardrail was not here. 4 of the victims were dumped right in this brush here. This is just to give you an idea of how desolate, how open. What you can see is how protected the north of where the site is, this marsh here. That leads us to believe he did come by car and not by boat, based on this being a protected site here. Every difficulty that terrain could throw at us, this terrain did.
We found a body at Gilgo Beach. 2 days later, on December 13th, 3 more bodies were found.
That was the largest crime scene search in the department's history. Ultimately, we were able to discover the remains of 10 human bodies and ultimately, finally, discover Shannon Gilbert, which was the main point of our search, which is how it originated.
Even the Almighty was offended and just couldn't allow this horror to exist and continue.
Remains of a female toddler between the age of 16 and 32 months was also discovered.
These type of serial murder cases are very difficult to solve.
The past 3 to 5 years has been the first time where you have a number of different agencies with particular expertise all on the same page working to solve this case.
There's no setback now. If there was a setback, there's certainly no setback now.
Will it ever be solved?
It will never be solved.
Gilgo is one of the barrier beaches off the south shore of Long Island. Homes, developments, a lot of it is just kind of open space, beautiful area, but very thick vegetation, especially 10 years ago, very marshy. Suffolk police had not said anything publicly about the Gilgo Beach murders for many years, but we had some breaking news in 2020.
I want to emphasize to everybody here, we let the facts dictate where we're going to go with this investigation. It's very dangerous to speculate or come to conclusions before all the investigation is completed and the evidence is reviewed. We decided that we're going to really leverage our best resource, which is the public. To keep this case in the public's attention and keep it alive is really important. We believe that the belt was handled by the suspect and did not belong to any of the victims.
And they were asking the public's help in identifying who might have owned this belt, who might have had this belt. It's a unique looking belt because it had the letters either HM or HW on it, depending on how you hold it. Hart and other officials said, one of the ways we might get a solution to this case, we might find out who the killer is if someone can tell us who this belt is.
Valerie Mack, who was 24 years old in 2000 when she went missing. Family members last saw her in the spring or summer of 2000. She was never reported missing.
Suffolk County Police, along with the FBI, were able to identify the remains of Valerie Mack using a new DNA technology called genetic genealogy.
2 decades after part of her body was first discovered 44 miles east of here in Manorville. The rest of her remains found off Ocean Parkway here nearly 11 years later.
In May 2020, police announced a major breakthrough in the case. They had identified the remains of one of the women, one of the sex workers that had been found. She was formerly known as Jane Doe number 6, and now we know her as Valerie Mack.
There's only a few different ways this case gets solved. Human intelligence, we receive additional information, new information from the public. We collect phone intercepts from wiretaps, right? We collect E-ZPass records. We collect phone records. We collect cell site information, geolocation information, LPR hits. You have all this data, and then you have a sophisticated data analytics tool that connect those dots.
Would these people have been found if not for Shannon?
It's not likely that any of these other bodies would have been found without the search for Shannon.
Well, this case really starts with Shannon Gilbert. She had gone missing, and when she ran from the home of her date that she had arranged for on Craigslist, she called 911. There was a search for Shannon. That's when they first stumbled upon some remains, searching for Shannon Gilbert.
Hi, good morning.
Hello, Judge. I've asked the court this morning to allow me to release the 911 tapes and the transcript of those tapes to the public.
Why should the public be able to hear the tape?
I believe that the public should be able to hear the tape so that they can compare what's on the tape with what the police claimed all these years occurred and make their own decision about what really occurred. And secondly, and equally as important, that they will then, the public will be able to help us solve this case. What are we to lose?
The 911 tapes have been sort of the subject of a lot of debate and intrigue about what exactly is on the 911 calls. He very recently was in court again, pushing to have the tapes released publicly. However, the judge again said that because of the police department's concerns about the tapes hurting their active crime investigation, he was not allowed to release them to the public.
If we think that releasing it may help or may further the investigation in some way, then we will talk about it and then we'll do it. But if it has no investigative value, then it just clouds what's out there. And our job is to solve the crime, not to feed the thirst for the information.
One of the still unidentified victims in this case is Peaches. Investigators sort of dubbed her Peaches because she had a tattoo of that fruit on her chest. Police were able to use DNA technology to link baby Doe with Peaches and determine that they are a mother and a child.
This child is related to the female whose remains were discovered by the New York State Police approximately 7 miles away in Nassau County on April the 11th.
It's every day hopefully you're getting a step closer, by continuing to interview people, continuing all of these DNA advances, and hopefully we identify who she is first. That'd be the most significant step in this investigation. We do work with the FBI with the DNA now, especially with genealogy and the new Ancestry.coms, et cetera, to try to further match her with some kind of family or familiar.
As I've said prior publicly, it has been challenging for both the Asian male and the toddler for different reasons, but there are other avenues that we will pursue on that, so we're not going to give up on that.
You have the police commissioner at the time, when this case first broke, and the district attorney at the time, when this case first broke, Commissioner Dormer and District Attorney Spoda, publicly arguing about theories of this case.
We believe that this person, and we still believe it's one killer at this point, unless we get information that would change that. And that's possible in any investigation.
The district attorney, Thomas Spoda, he was contradicting Dormer.
I would never even discuss this publicly, except I think that the facts that have been disclosed so far do not bear out a single killer theory at all.
A couple of years after the first bodies were found, the chief of department, Jimmy Burke, came under investigation by the federal government. He had and was ultimately found guilty. Burke had cut ties with the FBI once the federal government started to investigate him.
When I was police commissioner, one of the first things I did was I conducted a top-to-bottom assessment of the department. And part of that assessment was to look at high-profile cases. Of course, Gilgo was the first case I took a look at. And I was looking through the file, and I actually found a supplemental report that claimed that the Suffolk County Police detectives were intending to send evidence over to the FBI for analysis. And they were told not to by the district attorney. That's remarkable. And so that's why one of the first things that I did as police commissioner, right out of the gate, was call the FBI Long Island office and ask them to join our investigation and play a pivotal and critical role in that investigation. Coincidentally, the person I called was Geraldine Hart.
So it's difficult to really kind of Monday morning quarterback the decisions that were made. You know, I will say that I think a more consistent involvement by the FBI in this case from the beginning would have been beneficial. I certainly would say that.
How much did that set back the investigation? How much did that hurt this?
It's hard to say, right? Certainly the lack of collaboration is significant. And you know, whether it was work that the FBI could have done sooner on a profile, or whether it was work that the FBI could have done sooner on DNA or phone analysis. And it's not just the FBI, right? It's other resources that the Suffolk County Police Department could have used and deliberately chose not to.
You know, at least 6 of the Gilgo Beach victims had worked as escorts, sex workers. And that's, you know, that is a common population for serial killers. That is a population they frequently target.
You know, sex trafficking played a big role with the victims in Gilgo Beach. When we think about Gilgo, we don't really know some of the true history of all of those victims. And that's one of the things that we're trying to avert with the victims that come into our facilities now.
When they come into us, they might think that their trafficker is actually their boyfriend or somebody that's you know, helping them. In reality, that's the furthest thing from the truth.
Shannon was an intelligent young girl, and she came into a difficult family situation, born into it. She was put in foster care at a very early age and remained in foster care right up through her teenage years. But like so many girls similar to her, this was a way out for her. This was a way up and a way out of the mess in which she had grown up.
Shannon's mother, Mary Gilbert, though tragically died in 2016. She was killed by another one of her daughters, Sarah Gilbert. John Ray represented Sarah Gilbert at trial. He claimed that she had essentially a psychotic breakdown and that led her to kill her mother, that she was hearing voices. But Sarah Gilbert was convicted of murder and is now in prison upstate. It was a very sad and tragic end to that part of the story.
Shannon was very, very smart. She was very intelligent. She loved to cook, spend time with her sisters, and she would always have these little heart-to-heart conversations with her baby sister, Stevie, and encourage her to do good and listen.
My daughter Megan was very outgoing, friendly. She had a heart of gold. She would lighten up a room if she walked in there. Anybody that met Megan just fell right in love with her.
To her, it was a job. You know, it was for money. She was taking college classes. And she said, Mom, you know, as soon as I'm done with college and get my degree, she says, I'll stop. Just like the other victims.
We view them as victims because in many cases they are. Many homicide victims, they might be in gangs, they might be drug users. It doesn't matter to us. We want to solve the homicide. We want the killer off the street. We want to bring closure for the family.
And investigatively, it makes sense. I mean, you're going to get information from these women and lead these investigations much higher up the chain than you would have otherwise.
Maybe this interview generates some more interest and some more tips that we can follow up on. There has been, and hopefully it continues to be.
And we're at a point now where there are dozens of people actively working on this case from numerous different disciplines and numerous different agencies. We're continuing to put an enormous amount of resources into this case. We think it's solvable. We won't rest until it's solved.
Do you think that they will ever be solved?
We're still hopeful. You know, we are hopeful that we're going to get that one piece that's going to break us through. So that break can come from anywhere. With someone, and they may have confided in somebody, and that person's near their deathbed. We had a 50-year-old murder case that was solved that way out east a couple of years ago. Sometimes we get that piece of evidence. And in this case, we're hopeful.
The team that's in place now is probably the strongest it's been throughout this investigation. I mean, you had instances where you had some disconnect between, in the past, between the commissioner and the DA. You had disconnect certainly with our federal partners. Now you have everybody at the table, and that's probably the first time in this investigation. And there are children that were left without a mother, and that's a very difficult situation. And we want to hopefully help them if we can.
Will it ever be solved?
It will never be solved. And the reason it will never be solved is that even if it really is solved, there are plenty of people who just won't believe it. And you'll never convince anybody who isn't already made up their mind about what really happened.
For the victims' families, this is really obviously something that's imperative for them. And we understand that, and we're moving in that direction in order to give them some sort of closure.
Megan made me strong. She made me keep going, keep fighting till justice is served. If we could save just one person that's being sex trafficked, it would make us so happy.
You can hide, but only for so long. Because, if I pass today, I'm gonna have my children fight. And if they pass, their children will fight. And this is not over until God says it's over.